Hey friends, it's Laree with the blog wagonwheelhomestead.com. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to take this and make it into this. This is beef tallow, and it's rendered and processed down from the fat from a beef. So I'm going to show you how to process beef tallow all the way from start to finish. So we're going to show you how to go to your local butcher shop and get beef tallow raw, whether it's kidney fat or regular fat. We're going to show you all about the different kinds, what it looks like, how to cut it apart, how to take the glands out of it, how to grind it. A lot of people just go to their local butcher and have the butcher process the tallow and grind it for them. So they just bring home ground tallow, but we're going to back it up a step and show you how we do that here at our own homestead. And then I'm going to take you, we're actually just going to put it in big trash bags that are not scented. Really important. They're clean and not scented, and put them in the freezer because we have a lot going on the next few days. It's a couple days before Thanksgiving, and we are not going to have time to process this fully into tallow for the moment, but I'm going to stick it in the freezer, and then we're going to take it out in a couple of weeks when we have a little more time, and I'm going to show you how to cook it down and how to make it completely pure, and then we're going to make it shelf stable. Okay, I store this in jars in my pantry, shelf stable. You don't have to freeze it, you don't have to refrigerate it. It keeps for a long time. Some of you are probably wondering, what is beef tallow and why do I care, and why would I want to learn about it? Why would I want it in my pantry? Beef tallow is a fat. Okay, it comes from all the fat off of a beef animal. It is the fat that is actually closest in kind to human fat. Okay, so it's really great to put on your skin. So you can make lotion, you can make lip balm, you can make soap, you can make all kinds of skincare products out of tallow. I'm going to show you how to get it completely pure so it doesn't have any beef smell, okay? And it's really great to have for your skin. So first of all, you can make all your own skincare products with it. Second of all, you can cook with it, and that's what we do all the time. So anything that we fry, donuts, fried potatoes, chicken fried steak, anything that you would fry, onion rings, we fry in tallow. Anytime that I do any cooking, I put two kinds of fat in, typically. It's either melted beef tallow or melted butter. And those are two kinds of fats that we can source here locally or even on our own homestead. We do use the beef tallow from our own beeves, but if we need more, we can always just go to our local butcher and get more, because we happen to live in an area where a lot of beef is processed every day. We live in Nebraska in beef country, so it's easy for us to get beef tallow at any time. So then it's locally sourced. And for us, we can get it, because we live in beef country, we can get it for free. So we just go to our local butcher and they give us, all their extra, because otherwise they're just going to throw it away. They just use it for trim, for making hamburger and different things, and whatever they don't need, they throw away. So I can get it, and so here is free fat for anything I need in my kitchen. And I don't know if you've noticed the price of oil lately, but it's very expensive, first of all. Second of all, seed oils are not good for you at all. They're carcinogenic. They're very bad for you. So, canola oil, all that is not good for you, right? So anytime you can source something locally, that's a plus. And anytime you can get something that's healthier for you, that's even better. And if it's inexpensive, right, it's even better yet. So that's what we choose to do for a lot of our fat. It's very similar to rendering lard. I know that you can render deer fat, you can render lard this a very similar way, you can render bear fat a similar way. Our family chooses not to eat lard products, so we only eat beef products or wild game, and so this beef tallow is a really good thing that we can source on our local homestead, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in today's video. Come along, let's go to the shop where my husband and kids are processing a bunch of tallow, and I'll show you the whole process. They're going to show you exactly how to take the glands out and how to run it through a grinder. By the way, and I'll show you this, but you can grind this in just a KitchenAid grinder too, or just a small grinder. We have a big grinder because we're processing some other meat today, but and so that's why we're doing all of this right now. While we have the grinder out, we're just going to do it all and put it on the pantry shelf and have it done. But you can do it in small batches, in a crock pot, in a small little grinder in your house, or go to the butcher and ask them to pre-grind it. You can totally do this and you can stop having to buy oil at the store. And you, by the way, you can make candles out of this also. So there's so many uses. In the old-fashioned days, the fat on an animal was the most valuable because it had so many uses. So let's go check out what's going on in the shop, and we'll show you how to process beef tallow. All right, so what is this piece you're working on here?
It's a kidney. This is kidney fat.
This is a kidney, okay. It's kidney fat.
It's not actually a kidney, it's just kidney fat.
It's just kidney fat, okay.
That's your best. That's your best stuff.
So this is the fat that's it's the cleanest, so it has the least amount of meat in it, and so it's the best for making like whipped tallow lotion, tallow balm, those kinds of things.
But it's got glands in it.
Okay, it's got glands in it.
And you want to get those out of there. I mean, you don't have to, but you should.
Because they can give it a funny taste, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you just cut it in, 1 to 2 inch long or thick strips so that you can see if there's a gland in each strip. Just chunk it off.
If it's fairly fresh, this was straight from the locker this morning.
Yeah, so
it's just
fresh.
Came out of the cooler this morning.
Yep.
This one is frozen, and it's about impossible to deal with.
So we're gonna have to let it thaw all the way out.
Thaw. Mm-hmm. But you can see how crumbly that is. That's your good stuff there.
Yep, that's pure fat,
There
pure beef tallow.
That's another good piece there, but some of these is just trim that comes off the sides of the rib cage or something, and it's not quite as good as stuff.
It's still
It'll have more cracklings or meat chunks or whatever in it.
It's still fine to use. It's better to use for like cooking meat though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It'll still make tallow.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll still cook down.
Right.
It's fine, but
So you just go through and break it off and chunk it off, and we're just putting it right into our grinder. But you can do this in a small grinder in your kitchen, and I'll try to link in the description box below a couple good grinders that you could get even from Amazon.
some of these have a gland right out in the tip, like in the brisket
Okay.
kind of area. If you get a chunk of that, and you can use your fat piece as a cutting board, so you don't dull your knives.
Okay. There's another gland. It's different than meat.
Yes.
It has a different color and a different
mushy.
texture. Yeah, it's mushy. It's a gland. It's not something you would want to eat.
It's tough, but it's gooey. It's not something you're gonna want.
So you just take it out and throw it out.
Pitch it.
Okay.
I mean, obviously they butcher them all the time with them. I'm sure there's some in your meat, but
They're supposed to cut it out though,
they're supposed
probably.
to cut it out. It should be cut out.
It should be cut out. Okay.
For me, anyways. It should be cut out. See, there's another little guy hiding in there.
Okay. And you can ask your local meat processing place to grind the tallow for you, and then you can get it pre-ground. But we're already processing some meat, so we're grinding anyway, and we like to do it ourselves. That way we know exactly what we're getting. At our specific locker, we can get these boxes of beef tallow for free because there's so many beeves that are butchered here where we live. But where you live, it might be a little bit different, but still, it's almost free cooking fat, which is amazing, not to mention the fact that it's much healthier.
Just keep whittling at it.
And so where's the kidney? It's not in that one?
I'm not sure. It's not inside of them. I think they peeled it out because some people keep them.
I see.
Some people keep them and eat them. I'm sure they went in the throwaway stuff.
Gotcha. But sometimes you'll get this. If you go to your locker, you go to your butcher shop and you ask them for a box of tallow, Sometimes they'll give you
No,
the kidney
it's
fat,
just
and
on
the
floor
actual
that goes in the track.
the actual kidney will be inside. It'll be inside all of this fat, right? And so you'll find it in there, and you'll just obviously cut it out because you don't want that in your tallow.
To this, but here's a big funny shaped one right here.
A big funny shaped gland that's got to be cut out. See, so you just.
And you can, I mean, if you don't have a lot of it or you have to pay for it, you can trim all this back around them. They're funny shaped in there, so you just keep whittling and.
Right. Where we don't have to pay for this, we don't have to be quite
we don't have
as
to be quite as frugal
picky
with it.
because we can just go get another box. But
Just like this morning, we had 3 boxes, but because of our other meat that we're adding this to, and here's something else too. You can get rid of that crap. There's not that much
gristle.
It's basically a gristle,
Okay.
but I'm not gonna even mess with
Mess
that,
with that 'cause it's got-
wrapped in and around, and we've
Okay.
got a whole nother great big monster there, so I'm not gonna mess with it. The more of this kind of stuff you take off, the less you're gonna have that doesn't cook down. Quicker than a cook down, I should
Right.
say.
The less impurities you'll have to deal with at the end. Of course, I'm going to show you how to get all those out, but the more careful you are at this stage, the better you'll be off. Better off you'll be in the end.
Down the road, yeah. I was thinking there was another great big one in here somewhere. In this chunk of tallow.
So see, he's just taking off a chunk and then cutting it into smaller chunks to make sure that you find any
And
glands.
part of that is it depends on your throat size in your grinder also,
True. Yeah, you want it to be the size that's going to go through your grinder.
easily. So
Yeah,
you don't
easily.
have to push it through
Yeah.
like the last one. See, there's a mark. That's an ink mark right there.
Okay.
Is what it is when they ink the hanging carcass.
Oh. And we'll get our own tallow off of our own beeves as well, but when we run out of that, it's nice to be able to just go get some from the local butcher plant.
There's a layer right there of like sinew or
Okay.
gristle runs through that, and there's really not that much there.
So toss that one.
That probably comes from the inside next to the flank, I would guess.
Okay.
There's kind of some more, some gristly stuff. Once you get in past that, see there that layer is right there.
Okay.
And it runs a seam inside there. I mean, your grinder will handle it, but
And I've
If
done
you got
this
a
on
big
my
enough grinder.
KitchenAid grinder and it works just fine. You just have to cut the pieces smaller and it takes longer. So obviously we like to do big batches of things. You've seen us do that with our canning and our preserving. And so I want a whole bunch of quarts of tallow in my pantry every fall so that I have it for the rest of the year. But you can do it little bits at a time, of course.
and you can freeze it and keep it.
Yep, you
It'll
can
keep
freeze
in your
it.
freezer
And then,
until
you know,
have time to do it.
right. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to put this in a great big trash bag that doesn't smell.
Doesn't smell, doesn't have.
Yep, one that's not scented. And then we are going to just put it in the freezer because we've got a lot going on the next few days and I do not have time to process this. You're going to need 2 or 3 days probably to fully process this all the way into shelf stable tallow for your pantry shelf. So I'm just going to stick it in the freezer, and on a snowy day in the next couple of weeks, I'll get it out and render it down, and I'll take you along with that process and show you exactly what I do. It's really not hard. And, you know, in the olden days, the fat on a critter was the most valuable. It wasn't actually the meat. It's because they could make candles with it and soap with it and cook with it. And I'm sure, you know, make lotion if they did that sort of thing. So it's really a valuable part of the critter, and obviously anymore we've kind of lost that skill because usually they just throw it away.
It's considered trim, And
Yeah,
it's all extra.
Yeah, it's all extra. It's what they use to add in to grind with meat to make hamburger.
Like an old cow that hasn't been fed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an old cow that's not very fat, they'll take extra trim from another beef. There's a gland.
There's a gland showed up.
And they will grind it in with the meat, and it'll make it so that it's fatter hamburger. That's a big one. Now, is there glands in like deer fat?
Yep.
There is. Okay, so any kind of fat, deer fat, buffalo fat, all that, you're gonna have to just process it like this. It's not hard. It's just something you gotta do.
They all have glands. That's how they locate each other, by smell.
Okay, interesting. And then the rest of this is just gonna be different. Here, move this a minute. See, these are just pieces that they've chunked off. But this works fine too. And sometimes, you know, maybe they won't give you the kidney fat, maybe, but this works okay too. It's just if you can get kidney fat, obviously it's great, big chunks, and it'll get you somewhere quickly with your project.
More impurities probably in a piece like this.
Right.
Obviously.
And we're doing this in our shop. We are gonna be, we've got to start on a meat room where we can have a better spot to process all of this, but you do what you can with what you have until you can do more. So that's just kind of how homesteading is. It's always a process.
You're always behind.
Well, no, but it's the journey, not the destination, right? My husband does not always agree with me on that. That's okay.
Journeyed out.
I like the adventure a little more than he does, but it's all good. We're a team, so that's what makes it work. And so this is just meat. It's just the edge of
that's
meat.
just beef, is all it is.
It's just beef. It's
Probably those pieces, well, for instance, this stuff probably come off of the rib cage on the outside.
Okay.
Probably where it came from. Most generally, there's not a lot of glands in that stuff.
Okay.
It's all just straight.
And we live in beef country, so they butcher a lot of beef here every week, a lot of different
they'll-
places.
They'll do 3 to 4 a day.
Here
like
in our
that.
local town, yeah.
That's just our local butcher shop.
Mm-hmm.
Or locker processing plant. And it's all custom stuff for local ranchers.
Right, so even though this isn't our own beef, we're comfortable with this because it's obviously way better than any sort of seed oil we could get from the store, and it's much cheaper, and there's so many things we can do with it. And it's, you know, it's all grown here locally, so it's locally sourced, even if it's not completely grass-fed, if it's, you know, grain-fed, we don't mind that in our family.
Most of the cattle here will be finished on corn.
Most of the cattle here, yeah, will be finished on
They'll run
corn.
them to yearlings, get the frame grown up on them on grass, and then they'll finish them on corn for like 4 months, 5 months, whatever it takes.
And this is in the fall of the year, so.
Yeah. Sharp knife is a bonus. This one's getting kind of dull.
Learning how to sharpen knives, there's another
That's a
homestead
whole
skill.
Ball of wax. And I have a Dunn wheel sharpener that is the best I've found so far.
We'll have to have you show us that sometime. We got a little bit of snow last night, and so I can hear the snow dripping off the roof. It's melting, that's a good thing when snow melts.
Get it gone.
Get it gone, that's right.
We've got too much to do for snow. Now, some of these chunks, like this, you really want to watch because there's tiny glands in them.
Oh, okay.
That an inch might be too thick. This one must be all right. So when you cook it down, there's another one of them little seams that's going to cook down and just be cracklings in your... My nose is running, that's not good. Going to be cracklings in your final product that you'll end up getting rid of. All right, let's run these guys through.
Awesome.
So we got some more room.
Maybe you don't put a whole bunch down, we're really good.
All right, continuing on showing you how to render beef tallow. So it's been about a month. We've had a busy month, and what we did is we put the tallow, I think as I showed you in the first part of the video, in these big trash bags. And so what I'm going to do is put this into some roaster pans. I've got a couple here I'm going to put on the table, and a couple probably that I'll have plugged in elsewhere. But obviously you'll get the idea from me showing you these two. And from about 40 pounds of tallow last time, I got 32 quarts or 32 pounds of finished tallow. So that's a pretty good rate of return. All right, these are roaster liners. I'll link these down below. You might be able to find them at your local grocery store. So I just put a little bit of water, probably 2 or 3 cups, in the bottom of each roaster. And I'm using roaster liner because my roasters are really old. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that. I've canned in these for years and used them for so many things. So just to keep my tallow nice and clean, I'm using these roaster liners. You don't have to do that if your roaster is nice and clean. You can also do this in a crock pot. You can do it on the stove top, but you're going to have to watch it really close and keep it turned down really low so it doesn't burn. So it's best if you do it in a slow cooker or a roaster. If you're just going to use your tallow for cooking, okay, you can put it in a pot on the stove, very low heat. Cook it until all the fat is separated from the cracklings or from the little pieces of meat. Strain it off, put it into containers, and put it in your freezer. Okay, and you can use it out of your, just take it out of your freezer, thaw it out, and use it. That's totally fine. It's going to have a little bit more of a beefy smell. It won't have a beefy taste. Okay, but what I'm going to show you how to do is how to render it down all the way. We're going to render it down 3 times. So that you get all the impurities out, most all of the smell, and that's why we're going to do it at a really low heat, so that you can use it to make face balm and lip balm and, you know, all kinds of candles, all kinds of things. Okay? So that's what we're doing, is the full process. And then what I'm going to show you how to do, of course, as I mentioned, is how to make it shelf stable for my pantry. And, you know, if you have all the impurities out of it, then of course it's going to keep as long as it's sealed. All right, so you put a little water in the bottom so it doesn't stick. Then we're going to put some more water in here because we're actually going to be rendering our tallow in water, and that's going to help to draw all the impurities out. The water is going to always sink to the bottom when the tallow cools, and all the impurities will be in the bottom of the tallow. Okay, it's really kind of a cool thing. All right, so I'm going to just add about 1 quart of water to each roaster, and you don't have to measure it. It's not an exact science. It's just putting some water in it, okay? Now this bag is extremely heavy. It's like 60 pounds or something. So for the first little bit, I'm just going to use a scoop, and I'm just going to scoop this out and stick this right here into the roaster. because if I try to dump it, we'll have us a big mess. I'm famous for big messes in the kitchen, but that's usually because I'm trying to accomplish an awful lot. I'm trying to be careful and show you the right way to do this. You can turn your roaster on about 250. If you're using a crock pot, I would just turn it on low overnight. Here's a big chunk. This is still, again, we kept this in the freezer. It's still partially frozen. So that will be a little faster. You don't want to heat this really high because it could overflow. And of course, if the fat overflows, you don't want it to catch fire. So just fill it, level full. And then turn it on 250. And this is going to take 2 or 3 days, but it's very hands-off. So, we spent probably an hour grinding all of this in the shop. And then it's just going to take me a few minutes to get this started. And we're just going to basically be straining it off. And, then we'll reheat it a couple times, strain it off again, and then we're going to be putting it into jars. So very hands-off, not a lot of time involved here. All right, so that one's good. We'll fill up our other one. And I have a couple more bags of this in the freezer. So, I only took out one trash bag because I only want to do so much at a time. I also, it's really cold outside right now. So the nice thing about this is I can set this back outside as long as it's, up away from any animals. I can set this back outside and it's going to stay cool. And I'm not going to have to worry about it spoiling. Like I don't have to put it back in the freezer or try to find room in the fridge, It's really nice to take care of all your meat in the fall and winter. That's what they used to do, and it still is the easier way to go because you always have an option for chilling it back out if you need to. Also keep in mind that every roaster's temperature might be a little bit different, and maybe that's just because my roasters are old, but I have 4 roasters. And some of them seem to cook a little hotter on 250 than others. So, if you feel like it's cooking pretty fast, you might want to turn it down. The idea here is just to melt it really low and separate the fat from any little pieces of meat, that are still in here. This is a really nice, clean batch of tallow, so it's going to be beautiful tallow when we're all done. All right, I'm just going to turn this on to 250, and I'll show you how it looks here in a couple of hours, and then we'll continue on in the morning. Checking on these just before bed. They've been running for 3 or 4 hours probably. So you can see, there's a chunk of fat in the middle that's still melting. That's because these roasters, the heat from these roasters is on the outside. Now, I did add a little bit more to this because I ended up having just enough for 3 roasters. And as this cooked down a little bit, there was actually room on top for some more. I could see that I could add some without it running over. So I did add just a little bit more to these, just so that I didn't have 4 roasters to clean up. So I have these 2 and then 1 more. So I'm just going to continue to let these cook on low and slowly melt this fat away from the impurities until morning, and then I'll show you the next step. All right, I want to show you what this looks like the following morning. It's actually late morning, so you don't have to follow a perfect time schedule with this, but it's looking really good. You can see that it's fat and that all of the meat has cooked out and separated out. Okay, there's a little bit of pink left. It just means it's not cooked the beef pieces to the point where they're actually flavoring the tallow. Okay, that's really a good sign. It just means that you've melted. See, that's meat. There's really not any fat. There's meat and some gristle, but there's no fat left on that. So what we're gonna do now is strain this off, and it's really cold outside today, so I'm just gonna set this outside to let it cool. If you're doing this in a warmer climate, you would wanna put it in the refrigerator to get it to solidify and all the impurities to separate. So the easiest way that I have found to strain this off is I use a 5-gallon bucket. You could also use a big pot. And this is an old milk strainer. These are what they used to put in the top of cream separators to strain the milk. So any kind of a strainer will work. And you know, if you have 2 people, if you don't have this exact setup, you might need somebody to help you, or else you can just scoop it off, right? There's lots of different ways. But what I'm gonna do is take this strainer and just, it sets right in the top of this bucket, which is great. Then this is a piece of cheesecloth. Now this is more like butter muslin. It's really fine. And I'll put a link to this in the description box below. I just buy it like 3 yards at a time, I think, on Amazon. And then I just, you know, fold it over and cut it into squares. And then I use this for cheese making. I strain off lots of things when we're canning. And of course, I use it for making tallow as well. It's just gonna be a way of straining this. So the big strainer is just gonna hold our cheesecloth. And because these are so full, to start off with, I just have a jug here, and I'm gonna just scoop out a bunch of tallow, and I don't care if I get some of the meat pieces with it. This is always just a little bit messy. There's just no way for you to not splatter a little bit of tallow somewhere. It's just kind of part of it. It's nicer if you can do this outside, but again, it's very cold outside, so we'll just make it work. I usually only do this once a year. I just make one big mess and then have it over with. And if it strains kind of slowly, because some of the fat and stuff gets caught in the bottom, all I do is just pick up the cheesecloth and kind of move it a little bit. And it allows the tallow to fall down through into the bucket. Then what I usually do, and sometimes it makes a mess, but is I just pick this up and pour the rest of it in. Try not to splatter, but it's difficult. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, so this is my, roaster liner. It's gonna be really nice. I'm not even gonna have to scrub this roaster at all when I'm done. So here's the fat, the impurities that are left in this cheesecloth, and I'm just gonna kind of pick it up and rock it back and forth until all of the tallow has drained out. You don't have to get every single drop because obviously we have plenty here, but waste not, want not. Okay, and so this is what it looks like. And I'm just gonna dump it here into this, back into my pot. And you can take this out and dispose of it. The birds really like to eat that fat. You actually could make broth out of it if you wanted to, but I make broth with with soup bones, so I don't usually do that, but you could. So yeah, this is all that's left out of that whole roaster full of tallow. So I'm just going to take this out and spread it out somewhere in the woods for the birds and the animals to eat. And I'll probably just keep adding to this actually, because we've got to do this for these other couple roasters. Let me see how much that made. That actually made a pretty decent amount. So since I'm doing such a big batch, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to, you can leave your tallow. That's what it looks like. See how yellow it is? Full of vitamin D, all kinds of vitamins and minerals from those cows soaking up the sun. It's beautiful. So this is a 5-gallon bucket. It's a little over half full. You can leave your tallow in here to solidify, but I find that it works best if it's in a wider container. Okay, you could put it back in your roaster pan if your roaster pans aren't like mine, but I'm going to use this and a couple other pans and just spread it out flat so that then the impurities have more of a space to gather on the bottom. You'll see what I mean when we get to that point. So I'm actually just going to take this outside and pour a bunch of tallow in it, and then I'll be back and we're going to keep straining this off. The same thing with the second roaster. Something I forgot to tell you, so I'll tell you now. When you first start the tallow, and if you forget, it's okay, you can always do it later. Along with the water, I always add like a 1/4 cup of salt to a roaster full of tallow. Again, it doesn't have to be an exact amount, but it helps the impurities to get drawn out. So again, you don't have to, the salt will not stay in the tallow. It will separate out with the impurities and the water on the very bottom, and you're going to see that in the next step. But salt is a good thing to add. It helps to purify this, and I threw that in yesterday and then I forgot to show you, so. Okay. Everything is always so greasy when we're done with this project. Just moving it back and forth. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this fat, cracklins, whatever you want to call it, before I dump the rest of this in. All right, and I'm going to go find another flat container to dump this beautiful tallow in outside. Let it get nice and cold, and tonight or tomorrow morning then we will melt it down again and get some more of the impurities out. All right, it's the next day, and these are the 2 pans of tallow. They're really heavy. I had them outside, and I actually brought them in just a little bit ago to kind of let them thaw a little bit because it's really, really cold outside, like 20 degrees or something. And so anyway, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this in this great big 10-gallon cheese pot that I have, and we're gonna just melt. What we're gonna do first is we're gonna cut it out of here, take the impurities out, and then we're gonna melt it down in this pot really slow. And then we're gonna put it back in these, we're gonna clean these, put it back in here and let it solidify again. Then we're gonna cut it, melt it down again. Every time you melt it down, we're gonna add a little water and a little salt, and you're gonna see that that's gonna pull the impurities out. We're gonna do that 3 times, then we're gonna put these into jars. So let me just show you the next step. I actually already had a little bit that I was working on from a batch I had started previous, and this is really funny stuff. This is like the Jello. This is the impurities, and it's literally, you know, like Jello. So anyway, that's the impurities. That's just, this is my yucky bucket, if you will, my slop bucket. So it's a bit tricky to get it out of, you know, these containers, but we're gonna do our best. So I'm just gonna cut it carefully with a knife. Obviously, if you had it, you know, in a big silicone container that you could just pull the outside off of, that would be the best, but I don't have anything like that, and so this is just always how I do it. And it does work fine. It's not so bad once you get the initial piece out, but that is a bit of a puzzle. So let me see what I can do here. It's much more difficult if it's in a really deep 5-gallon bucket. It's a lot better to have it in a wider, flatter container like this, if possible. Okay, I just rinsed off my spoon because I was working on that other batch. All right, I'm gonna do my best to peel this first one out of here. And again, you just have to be a little patient with getting this first chunk out. Then you can reach down and pull up the other chunks. So see, that's just pure white tallow. When we get clear to the bottom is when you're gonna see the impurities. That's the great thing about this, is no matter what you put, what is in here for impurities and what you add as far as water and salt, which helps draw out the impurities, it's always gonna settle on the bottom so it separates completely. And that's what's really kind of cool about this. It's really satisfying to see it just set up into this beautiful white block of perfect tallow. Okay, I got all the way to the bottom. I don't see any impurities on that. We don't have to be super picky this first time because, you know, obviously we're going to melt this down a couple more times, but I'm going to show you when I pull this up here where the impurities are and how you can just kind of scrape them off. And obviously you get less and less each time. I just want really clean tallow because I want to be able to make facial products with it, lotion, lip balm, all the things without having to. So there's some, see it? And we're just gonna, it's just like Jello. And then this is, it might be hard for you to see. There's a little tiny bit of brown, you can see it. So I just am scraping that part off. It's just where the sediment gathered on the bottom. Okay, there's the impurities. Just gonna take it, and again, I'm just gonna take, this is just where the water and stuff are right on the bottom. I'm just scraping that off. So you're just, you know, separating it. You get some of this. That's good fat. Okay, and then here is all the Jello. See? There it is. So we're just gonna throw that into the slop bucket. All right, now let's see if we can get this piece to, well, let's see. There's a chunk right over here we still need to get. All right, let's make sure this is cut all the way through here. Gotta be careful with greasy hands. Okay, I'm gonna set this off to the side. See if we can pop this whole thing loose. I don't know if we can. You definitely want to use a really good spoon or you'll end up breaking it. Let me just see if I can get a chunk of this off. There we go. It's a whole chunk coming out, okay? And I don't know if you can see, but this is just a little slightly brown on the bottom. I think you can see that. So I'm just gonna scrape it with my spoon until I get down to pure white tallow, and I'm gonna just put it right here into my slop bucket. And it doesn't really hurt anything if you leave that on there, but if you're not gonna pressure can this, you do wanna get it nice and clean. And like I said, I want it clean anyway, because I wanna be able to make lip balm or whatever. There, see how white that is? So I just took that off, and so I'm just gonna put the sludge, if you will, into our slop bucket. It's another good piece because it's just on the top. And tallow is, if you're not familiar with tallow, tallow is solid at room temperature. So when you go to cook with it, you are gonna wanna melt it, and then you can use it just like, whoops, just like liquid oil in your cooking. So in your cookies or your muffins or anything that calls for oil, just use melted beef tallow. But you are gonna have to, see there's a big piece. You are gonna have to melt it first. There's Jello. Kind of fun stuff, actually. Some of these good pieces here. I'll pull these out. All right, and then here's the brown sludge. It's just tan, actually. Just scraping it off. And I'm gonna continue doing that with this whole process here. Then I'll show you how, I'm just gonna put this on the stove on really low heat. Just let it melt really low and slow. And then I'm gonna wash these pans. I'll show you that, pour it back in here and let it solidify again overnight. And tomorrow we'll do the same process again. So really simple, just something you gotta mess with a couple times a day, and then you'll have your fat all ready for the year. So I have my heat really low. I'm just gonna slowly melt this, and I'm gonna pour in some salt, which is again gonna help to pull out the impurities. Just dumping some in. I'm also gonna put in a couple quarts of water, because that's gonna give something for the impurities to cling to, and again, it's going to settle on the bottom once this cools. It took about 2 hours to completely melt this, and I actually just let it kind of cool off just a little bit. Still liquid, of course. And I'm gonna take it outside now and put it into those pans and let it set overnight and solidify, and tomorrow we will do the same process again. So it's the next day, and this actually, it has a little bit of moisture on the top because we got snow last night and I didn't cover it, which is fine. Doesn't hurt anything. So we're gonna pull, actually what we're gonna do, we're gonna work on this first. I ended up leaving a little bit in the bottom of here. So we're gonna pull this out, make sure that we get it as dry as possible. Now, because we are going to seal it, we don't have to get it completely dried. This is actually shelf-stable tallow, so you can keep it beside your stove for a good long time, and for a couple weeks, and it's going to be just fine. And you can just put it into big containers and store it in your pantry that way, that isn't sealed. That's fine, but what you do is you run the risk of it molding if there's any moisture. So I'm gonna get as much moisture out of it as possible, and then because we're gonna actually seal this stuff of mine, I'm gonna show you how to seal it in jars. It doesn't matter if it has a little bit of moisture left. That's not gonna bother anything, but I just want you to know, you can just put this into, old coffee cans or something like that and store it in your pantry that way. But if you do that and you don't seal it, you're gonna wanna get as much moisture off of it as possible. So let's look at the bottom of this. See just a little bit left of impurities. See if I can hang on to it here without. And I'm just gonna scrape these off. This tallow is perfect. I brought it inside just for a little while to warm it up. And the stuff I did yesterday, it worked out fine, but it was a little too warm. I'm just gonna scrape this down in here. We're gonna go wash this out really good before we start putting all the tallow in here. One thing you can do is you can take this tallow, once you have it at this point, get all the impurities off of it, and you can put it into the refrigerator, like chunk it up, put it in the refrigerator, and the refrigerator will pull off any extra moisture, like it will dry it out. So that's certainly an option, but I have a lot of tallow here, and so I'm probably not gonna try to find room in the refrigerator for all of it. I have an old towel. This is just an older towel, and I'm just gonna wipe this clean. There, and that looks good. Beautiful, clean wheel of tallow. I'm gonna just set it over here, and I'm gonna go, this was what was left. I'm gonna just go wash this out really good. I'm gonna dump this grease stuff outside, of course not down my drain. Wash this out, and then we're gonna get all of this ready to melt down and put into jars. Okay, this is all clean, and I'm gonna dry it out, because again, we don't want any water with our tallow this time if we can help it. And a little bit's okay, because we're gonna seal it. But the less the better. We just want it pure tallow. Okay. So I'm gonna put this big chunk back in here. And it will melt down, of course. And then we're gonna start working on this piece. So I just use my rag to keep my spoon really clean, and hopefully this will pop out of here pretty easy. Let's see. This might be a little bit more frozen. Of course, anything that's on the top that doesn't touch the bottom is gonna be perfectly pure. And I am gonna just take my rag and get the moisture off the top here. Okay. Such beautiful tallow. It's gonna make the best oil for frying donuts, for making cookies. Although I like to use butter a lot too, just because butter has a great flavor, of course. But if I'm running low on tallow, on butter, I can use tallow. If I can get one chunk of this out of here, then the whole thing will lift up, or it should. It was down below 0 last night, so this stuff did get pretty cold. Don't want to lose any of those little pieces down in there. Okay. And that looks pure and clean. Now what I did, this is of course what was on the top of this pot. And what I did when I poured it into these 2 containers is I actually added poured water in it as well, so that it would be on the bottom, so that the tallow had something to separate up against in case, for any impurities. So this one may not have any impurities in it at all. It may have all been on the bottom of this pot, which would be awesome. That would mean we just need to dry this off, and we're ready to start melting it down. Definitely frozen in the middle. And it's perfectly clean on the bottom, just slightly damp. Not even enough hardly to worry about. It's actually, the water on the bottom is actually ice. So I'm just wiping this off. See see if this whole chunk will come up. Yeah, it probably would have been clean enough almost after that last time. We wouldn't have had to do this a third time, but because I want to use this for body products, that's why I went ahead and did it another time. It doesn't hurt anything. Look, there's a big chunk. Another big chunk. Again, just wiping off the moisture. And on the bottom is the salt water. It's actually ice that's left. You can see it's very clean and very clear. So that's good. That's what we want. Just a little tiny bit of impurities on the bottom here really are not going to hurt anything, because once again we're going to seal this. This is just the salt that's collected and gathered the last few bits of impurities out of this. And once again, pretty nice and clean. So I'm going to put this on the stove and very slowly melt it over a couple of hours. Then I'm going to wash up and get them completely dry, some pint jars. I'm choosing to put these in pints, but you can, put it in whatever container you want. And then we will get this put into jars with lids, and it will naturally seal. It's going to be a very simple process. Okay, this is all melted. As you can see, it's about 150 degrees warm. We have a whole bunch. We're going to put these in pints this time, a whole bunch of pint jars. And I'm just going to use a measuring cup here, pour this in. Going to leave a little bit of head space at the top, about 1/2 inch or so, just like you would in canning. And I like to use a measuring cup with a handle, because then I can just hang it on the edge of my pot. You're going to want to make sure there's no oil on the edge of this jar. And then I'm using my favorite canning lids, which are 4 jars canning lids. They give me the best seal rate. And all I'm going to do very simply is place these on each jar, grab a ring out of my pile, and hand tighten them, and they are going to self-seal. So that's all that's going to be needed. We don't have to process these. They're going to self-seal, and they will be shelf stable and keep for a long time on the shelf. So I'll show you when we get done. We're going to fill all these up and get them ready for the shelf. And it's going to take, overnight before these are going to turn white and cool down. So they take a long time to cool down, and that's okay. We're just going to let them slowly cool, and in the morning they will all be sealed. And it still may have just a slight beefy smell. That's just kind of the nature of tallow. You can, add essential oils when you make this into lotion, or you whip it into tallow and even into lip balm. And you may smell it a tiny bit. As soon as it dissipates on your skin, you won't smell it at all, because this is pure, clear, as clean as you can get tallow. But just know that it may still have just a slight smell of beefiness, and that's just the nature of it, but it's so healthy for you. And of course, it's not going to hurt anything you cook with at all. You're never going to notice it that way. So just something to be mindful of. This is how the finished tallow looks. We ended up with 65 pints out of this batch. It's absolutely beautiful. Wonderful tallow. So this will get labeled. We'll take the rings off of this. This will get labeled and go on our pantry shelf, and it will be shelf stable for a long time. We'll have it for lots of cooking and lotion making and candle making and all kinds of things like that. So Well, thanks for coming along with me as I showed you how to process beef tallow from start to finish. Big family project for us, super fun. It's so nice to have on the pantry shelf, and I never have to worry about running out of oil, running to the store for it. And again, it's locally sourced and super healthy. So a box of beef tallow we get from our local butcher is about 55 pounds. And out of that, I get about 20 quarts. And so, which is about, there's 2 pounds in a quart, so about 40 pounds of tallow, finished tallow, or about 20 quarts of tallow off of a 55-pound box of meat. So that tells you there's about 15 pounds, you know, of impurities that we've cooked off of it or cut out of it, glands and the like. So that's a pretty good return, actually, 40 pounds of fat off of 55 pounds of the beginning part of the tallow. So anyway, thanks for coming along with me today. If you want to learn more about homesteading, about living a simple and sustainable life, definitely hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.